During no contact, an avoidant secretly expects you to still be emotionally available, even if you are not physically or digitally reaching out. They are banking on the same thing that kept this whole connection alive for so long: your big heart, your loyalty, your ability to stay emotionally tethered to someone, even when they are giving you the bare minimum. They are counting on that version of you who always answered the late-night messages, who always forgave the disappearances, who always found a reason to understand their distance. And even now, in the silence, they quietly assume that nothing important has changed inside you, that you are still replaying old conversations, still checking your phone, still wondering what you did wrong, still feeling guilty for taking space, because in their mind, no contact is a change in behavior, not a change in emotional availability. They think your hands might be still, but your heart is still circling around them, and that belief gives them a disturbing kind of comfort. It lets them feel chosen without having to actively choose you. It lets them feel missed without having to sit in their own missing. It lets them feel significant in your world while staying avoidant in theirs. They tell themselves that you are just cooling off, that you are just being dramatic for a while, that eventually the version of you who always reached back out will come back online. They picture you scrolling through your photos, listening to songs that remind you of them, talking about them with friends, wondering if they are okay. And there is a part of them that likes that, a part that feels powerful knowing that they still live in your mind, even if their name is no longer on your screen. Because that is how an avoidant stays in control without taking responsibility. They separate themselves from the emotional mess, while still feeding off the idea that someone out there is emotionally anchored to them. They might not be stalking your every move. They might not even be checking your status as obsessively as you imagine. But when something reminds them of you, a place, a phrase, a song, they do not imagine you free, light, detached. They imagine you waiting, hurting, remembering, wanting. And that image calms their fear more than any text thread ever could, because it tells them, I still matter to them. I can still go back if I want to. The door is probably still open. I still have a place in their heart without having to earn it. Even if they were the one who pulled away. Even if they were the one who said they needed space. There is a quiet script running in the background of their mind that says, you are still emotionally available. That if something goes wrong in their life, if a night feels too heavy, if their loneliness gets too loud, they can reach for you like they always did, and you will still respond with softness. You will still understand. You will still be that safe emotional cushion they fell back on without ever fully standing beside. And this is where the dynamic becomes so painful for you, because while they treat your emotional availability as a given, you are the one paying the price for it in the silence. You are the one lying awake at night, fighting the urge to break no contact, just to make sure they are okay. You are the one feeling the old reflex rise up in your chest, the reflex that says, check on them, fix it, smooth it, explain it. You are the one catching yourself mid-reach, pulling your own hand back from the phone, telling yourself, no, I did this for a reason. I need this distance. And that battle between the part of you that has always been available and the part of you that is learning to protect yourself is exhausting. It can make you feel weak, confused, torn in half. But I need you to know this, that inner war is not proof that you still belong to them. It is proof that you are rewiring a pattern that has lived in you for a long time. They secretly expect you to stay emotionally open like a house with all the lights on, waiting for them to decide if they want to come back. They expect that your heart is still turned toward the door, listening for their footsteps. They expect that even if you do not text, you are still emotionally on call, available for their late-night confusion, their sudden nostalgia, their temporary loneliness, because that is how it has always been. But no contact, when you truly honor it, is not just you stepping away from your phone. It is you slowly dimming the lights inside that house for them, one by one, and turning them back on for yourself. At first it feels unnatural. You catch yourself thinking about what they would say, how they would react. You catch yourself imagining their responses to your healing. But over time, the longer you keep your hands off that phone, the more your emotional availability begins to shift direction. Instead of being fully available to their absence, you start becoming more available to your own presence. You feel your feelings without running them through the filter of what they would think. You cry without rehearsing the speech you might one day give them. You journal without imagining they will read it. You talk to friends and actually listen to yourself. And slowly, quietly, you start to realize that the person who needs your emotional availability the most right now is not the avoidant on the other side of the silence. It is you. An avoidant will often confuse your silence with a temporary pause in service, like you are still emotionally on standby, just not actively calling. And that is why it shocks them later when they discover that no contact did not just mean you weren't speaking. It meant you were changing. It meant your nervous system was resting, your standards were rising, your vision was clearing, and your heart was learning that it deserves someone who does not treat its availability as an automatic right, but as a privilege to be honored, protected, and matched. And that change will not come in a dramatic moment. It will arrive quietly. In the day you realize you went a few hours, then a day, then 3, without checking their feed. In the moment you wake up and your first thought is not their name. In the moment someone asks about them and your answer feels less like a wound and more like a story from another chapter. That is when their secret expectation meets a new reality, the reality that you are no longer emotionally available to someone who was never fully available to you. And that, right there, is the beginning of your freedom. They expect you to be the one who breaks the silence first, so they never have to face the fear and vulnerability of reaching out themselves. And you need to understand how deep that expectation runs inside them, because it is not just about a text message, it is about their entire relationship with discomfort, with responsibility, with their own heart. They have spent years perfecting the art of avoiding emotional risk, of staying just far enough back that they never have to feel fully exposed. So even in no contact, even when the distance is heavy and the quiet is loud, they are secretly counting on the pattern that has always saved them. You, the one who cares more openly, the one who feels more visibly, the one who has always been willing to swallow pride and reach across the gap. They expect that at some point this silence will become unbearable for you, and you will fold. You will send the first message. You will break the ice. You will soothe the awkwardness. You will ease their guilt. You will do the emotional heavy lifting they have avoided doing their entire life. Deep down, they are afraid of rejection in a way they will rarely admit. They are terrified of sending a message and not being answered. Terrified of saying, "I miss you," and being met with coldness. Terrified of stepping toward you and finding out that this time you are gone for real. So instead of facing that fear, they hide behind your history. They replay all the times you chased before, all the times you reached out after conflict, all the times you broke your own boundaries just to reconnect, and they tell themselves a quiet story. They will come back. They always do. I don't have to risk anything. I just have to wait. And this story keeps them from growing, from apologizing properly, from standing in front of their own behavior and saying, "I hurt someone I care about and I need to fix it." Because as long as they believe you will eventually break no contact, they can postpone their courage. While you are sitting there feeling guilty for holding the line, wondering if you are being too harsh, replaying the moment you decided you could not keep doing this, they are using that same line as a safety net. They assume your silence is temporary, a phase, an emotional storm that will pass. They expect that at 2 a.m., on a lonely night, or on a random afternoon when a memory hits you, you will reach for your phone and type their name again. And the heartbreaking part is that if you have broken no contact before, if you have been the one who always eventually gives in, you have trained them to expect exactly that, not because you are weak, but because you love them so much you were willing to set your pain aside just to feel close again. You thought you were saving the connection, but you were also teaching them that they never have to be the one to bridge the gap. They carry that expectation like a shield, because as long as they believe you will eventually break the silence, they never have to sit fully in the consequences of what they did. They never have to ask themselves the hard questions. Did I push them too far? Did I take more than I gave? Did I take their love for granted? Did I confuse their loyalty with an endless supply of chances? Instead, they lean on the hope that you are suffering enough to come back. And that is a harsh sentence to say out loud, but you need to see it, because it explains why your pain has felt so invisible to them. They assume your longing will bring you back like it always has, so they do not have to face their own longing, their own regret, their own responsibility. Meanwhile, you are in your own battle. Every day of no contact is a tug of war between the part of you that wants to hear their voice and the part of you that remembers how much it hurt. There are days when your fingers hover over their name, when your heart pounds and your mind starts writing the message for you. Hey, just checking in. Hope you're okay. Can we talk? And you have to talk yourself down. You have to remind yourself why you stepped back, how many nights you cried, how many times you begged for clarity, how many ways you tried to fix something you did not break. And in those moments you might feel cruel. You might feel like the bad guy. You might feel like you are punishing them. But I want you to see the truth. You are not punishing them. You are interrupting a pattern. You are refusing to let them outsource all the courage, all the vulnerability, all the uncomfortable first moves to you again. You are giving the silence room to show you who they become when you are no longer doing all the reaching. If they truly care, if they are truly capable of growth, there will come a point where their fear of reaching out collides with the reality of losing you. A point where the comfort of waiting is no longer enough to numb the ache of your absence. And in that moment, they will have to choose, not just between texting or not texting, but between staying the same person they have always been, hiding behind avoidance, or stepping toward the person who loved them. With humility, honesty, and risk, they will have to decide whether their pride is more important than repair, whether their fear is more important than connection, whether their need to stay comfortable is more important than telling you the truth. And that choice is not something you can make easier for them by breaking no contact. In fact, every time you rescue them from that choice, by being the first to reach out, you relieve them of the very pressure that could have sparked their growth. I know it feels like if you just send one message, you will get relief from the anxiety, but that relief is temporary, and it often comes at the cost of reinforcing their belief that they never have to be the one who goes first. What would it look like to hold the silence long enough, not just for them to feel it, but for you to fully understand how much you have been carrying, how much you have taken on that was never yours to fix, how many times you have stepped over your own hurt to keep them comfortable? What if this time, instead of rushing in to break the distance for both of you, you let them sit in it and see what they do, not as a manipulation, but as information, because their actions in this space tell you everything about whether they are capable of meeting you differently. If they choose pride over vulnerability, avoidance over effort, ego over love, that is not your failure, that is their choice, and your job is not to soften the lesson that life is trying to give them by walking back into the room every time they run. Your job is to stay rooted in the truth that you are not the only one who should be brave in love. And if someone wants to be in your life after everything that has happened, they should be willing to be the one who finally says, "I miss you. I'm sorry. Can we talk?" without needing you to clear the path first. They expect that when they do come back, the door will still be wide open, your heart will still be waiting, and the standards you once had will still be negotiable. Because that has been the story for so long. Every time they slid back into your life with a soft message, a late night, "Hey stranger," and "I've been thinking about you," they found you there, tired but available, hurt but hopeful, disappointed but willing to try again. And somewhere along the way they stopped seeing that as a gift and started seeing it as a guarantee. They quietly trained themselves to believe that no matter how far they pulled away, no matter how many times they disappeared, no matter how many promises they left hanging in midair, your heart would remain a constant, like a light left on in the window of a house they knew they could always return to when the world outside got too cold. They expect that when they are done exploring, distracting themselves, numbing out, or hiding from their own feelings, they can knock once on that familiar door, and it will swing open just as wide as before. Your smile will be just as soft, your arms just as ready, your forgiveness just as quick, and the standards you once spoke about with shaking courage will quietly slide back down to make room for their fear again. This expectation is not always conscious, but it lives in the way they think, in the way they delay their growth, in the way they say to themselves, "I am not ready now, but if I ever decide I am, I know where to go." They replay the history. They remember all the second chances, the third, the 10th, the nights you cried and still chose them, the mornings you woke up and still answered, the conversations where you tried to end it and somehow ended up reassuring them instead. And they use that history like a safety blanket, wrapping themselves in the belief that your love is softer than your boundaries, that your attachment is stronger than your anger, that your loyalty will always outrun your self-respect. And because of that, they do not feel the same urgency you feel. While you are sitting in no contact wondering if this is truly the end, they are often telling themselves a quieter story. It is a pause, not a full stop. They just need time. They just need space. You just need to calm down. Eventually things will return to the old rhythm. They are not planning on meeting a new version of you on the other side of this silence. They are planning on walking back into the same old dynamic where their comfort sets the temperature and you adjust. They imagine scenarios in the future where something big happens. Maybe they get lonely. Maybe another relationship falls apart. Maybe life humbles them. And in that moment of vulnerability, they picture reaching for you. They imagine that you will answer with that familiar tenderness, that you will pick up where you left off, that you will be so relieved to hear from them that you will not question the timing, the sincerity, or the pattern, because that is how it has gone before, and they have mistaken your capacity to forgive as a promise that you will never change. But silence, when you actually honor it, does something they never account for. It grows you. It stretches your perspective. It gives you enough distance to see the pattern from the outside instead of drowning in it from within. At first you only feel the ache, the missing, the almost unbearable urge to break your own boundary just to hear their voice. But as the days turn into weeks, something else starts to happen. Your brain slowly comes down from the roller coaster. Your body starts to rest. Your nervous system, which has been living in fight or flight, finally gets small moments of calm, and in those moments, flashes of clarity seep in. You remember the nights you begged for reassurance and got excuses. You remember the times they promised change and delivered the same cycle. You remember how far you bent yourself to keep them. How many times you said, "It is okay," when nothing about it was okay, and you begin to ask different questions. Not do they still want me, but do I still want this? Not will they come back, but what version of me will be standing here if they do? While they are expecting the same unlocked door, you are slowly learning what it means to have a lock, not made of anger, but of self-respect, a lock that says, "Entry here is not automatic, access here is not owed, this house, my heart, my peace, is not a shelter you can run to only when the storms inside you get too loud. It is a home meant for someone who knows how to stay, who knows how to repair, who knows how to honor the space they occupy." And that shift is not loud or dramatic. It is subtle. You start journaling instead of texting them. You start talking to friends who hold you accountable to your worth. You start noticing how your body feels when you imagine going back. The tension in your chest, the knot in your stomach, the dread under the longing, and you let those sensations speak. You let them remind you of the reality beyond the fantasy. Because yes, there were good moments. Yes, there was chemistry. Yes, there were laughs and softness and late-night conversations, but there was also confusion, neglect, eroded standards, and a version of you that kept shrinking to be loved. And as that truth settles, the door they assume will always be wide open begins to close, not in a dramatic slam, but in a gentle, deliberate way. You start saying, if they come back, it cannot be like before. If they come back, there will have to be honesty, effort, consistency. If they come back, I cannot be the only one doing the emotional heavy lifting. And for the first time, you actually mean it. It might scare you to imagine them returning, and you not automatically letting them in. You might feel guilty even for thinking it, because there is still a part of you that equates love with self-sacrifice. But love that requires you to keep betraying yourself is not love that will ever truly hold you. It is attachment wrapped in anxiety. And what this no-contact season is quietly trying to teach you is that your heart can survive the grief of losing them, but it cannot survive the ongoing grief of losing yourself. So while they expect to walk back into your life and find the same version of you waiting at the threshold, I want you to know that it is okay, more than okay, for them to meet a different reality, a reality where the door is not flung wide open by reflex, but opened, if at all, with intention, with questions, with standards intact, a reality where you no longer negotiate your worth to make room for their fear, where you can hear them say, "I miss you," and instead of melting on the spot, you ask, "And what are you willing to do differently?" A reality where their expectations no longer dictate your response, because you finally understand that the door they took for granted was never a piece of wood and metal. It was your chest, your time, your faith, your future, and you are allowed, fully, unapologetically, to protect that now. They expect no contact to change you just enough to be less emotional and less demanding, but not enough for you to truly outgrow them and move on. Because in their mind the ideal version of you is not the one who wakes up to your worth. It is the one who still loves them just as deeply, but asks for far less. They are hoping that this distance will sand down your edges, not sharpen your clarity. They are hoping it will make you quieter, not stronger. They are hoping it will teach you to control your feelings, not to honor them. They picture you sitting in the silence, replaying every argument and rewriting the story so that your needs become the villain and their avoidance becomes justified. They imagine you thinking, "Maybe I was too intense. Maybe I pushed too hard. Maybe if I had been calmer, cooler, more detached, they wouldn't have felt so overwhelmed." And that is the version of you they secretly want to meet again. The version that has taken all the blame and turned it into self-improvement that primarily benefits them. The version that walks back into their life saying, "Don't worry, I've fixed it. I won't ask for as much this time. I won't bring up difficult conversations. I won't cry in front of you. I won't ask you where we stand. I'll just go with the flow." They want the healing you do in no contact to show up as you becoming easier to handle, not as you becoming impossible to play with. They are not sitting there hoping you discover how profoundly you were neglecting yourself. They are not hoping you wake up to the pattern of breadcrumbing and emotional whiplash. They are not hoping you finally see how much you were over-functioning while they underfunctioned. They are hoping that your therapy, your journaling, your late-night overthinking all end at the conclusion that you were the problem. That if you can just calm down, detach, be more chill, you and they will finally work. They like the idea of you getting stronger, but only if that strength translates to you being more self-contained, less likely to call them out, more willing to self-soothe in silence while they continue to operate at the same emotional level they have always operated at. They want distance to refine you into a version that causes them less discomfort, not into a version that demands more responsibility from them. They picture you doing mindset work, but only in one direction, toward accepting them as they are without asking for change. They imagine you listening to motivational speeches and deciding that you were too needy, that you should love yourself enough to stop asking other people to show up, and they quietly hope you will apply that in a way that lets them remain half in, half out, with no pressure, no labels, no clear accountability. Because a more self-reliant you sounds safe to their fear, as long as that self-reliance doesn't extend to letting go of them, as long as you still answer, still care, still feel the same, just in a more contained, less confronting way. The irony is that while they are hoping no contact softens you, the reality is that real healing, real self-reflection, real nervous system regulation does the opposite. It makes you more whole, and a whole you cannot be satisfied with half love anymore. In the first weeks or months of no contact, you probably do exactly what they expect. You spiral, you blame yourself. You replay the last conversations and imagine how you could have said things better. You convince yourself that if you had been more relaxed, they would have stayed. And in that state, it is tempting to decide that the solution is to become more low maintenance, to have fewer needs, to feel less deeply. But the longer you sit with your own heart, the more you begin to see that your demands were never outrageous. Asking for clear communication is not drama. Asking for consistency is not manipulation. Asking for respect is not being too emotional. Wanting to know where you stand is not an attack. It is emotional maturity. And as those truths sink in, something inside you clicks. You realize that the problem was never that you felt too much. It was that you kept shrinking your feelings to fit into a relationship built around someone else's fear. No contact, when you use it to turn inward instead of obsessing outward, slowly starts to show you the cost of dimming yourself. You notice how your body relaxes when you are not waiting for a text. You notice how your mind clears when you are not decoding mixed signals. You notice how much more energy you have when you are not constantly managing their reactions. And that lived experience begins to matter more than the fantasy of how it could have been. Their expectation is that you will come back calmer so they can keep the same level of effort. Your actual evolution is that you start to understand you deserve someone whose natural level of effort matches what you thought you had to tone down. They expect your healing to make you more tolerant of their avoidance, but real healing makes you less willing to tolerate anything that abandons you emotionally. They expect you to learn to regulate your reactions so you stop overreacting when they vanish. But real regulation makes you notice that disappearing acts are not something a regulated nervous system can or should be okay with. They expect you to become more emotionally independent so they can be even less emotionally present. But real independence shows you that you would rather be alone than partnered with someone who treats your heart like a backup plan. They think time and space will make you grateful for any piece of them you can get, but time and space, if you are honest with yourself, can also make you see how little you were actually getting. As you grow, your language with yourself starts to change. You move from, "I was too much," to, "I was asking the wrong person to meet me," from, "I ruined it by wanting more," to, "They showed me exactly where their limit is," from, "I hope I can prove I'm easier now," to, "I hope I never again make myself smaller just to keep somebody who cannot meet my heart." And that shift is what terrifies the part of them that wanted you sought me. Available and endlessly forgiving, because an expanded, healed, self-respecting you is their worst-case scenario and your best one. You are no longer a person who will celebrate breadcrumbs like a meal. You are no longer the person who will call emotional starvation patience. You are not coming back with less. You are coming back with more clarity, more standards, more groundedness. And from that place, if they show up unchanged, you will not be able to pretend you do not see it. Their old tricks will not land the same. Their vague texts will not make your heart race the same. Their breadcrumb posts will not send you into the same spiral. Because you have felt the difference between a life built around their lack and a life built around your own wholeness. And once you feel that difference, you cannot unknow it, no matter how much they secretly expected no contact, to simply polish you into a quieter version of the same devoted heart they took for granted. They expect that no matter how long they stay silent, the bond you feel with them will hurt you more than it ever forces them to grow, so they can return on their terms and on their timeline. And I need you to really see how much they have been relying on that. Because in their mind, the connection you share is like an invisible elastic band. They believe they can stretch it, pull it, disappear with it, walk all the way to the other side of their fear, and somehow it will never snap. It will always pull them back toward you. Whenever they decide they are ready, they are counting on the way you loved them, the way you forgave them, the way you justified their behavior. They are counting on the fact that your attachment has always hurt you more than it has ever truly challenged them. So deep down they assume that pain will keep you in place, that the ache you feel in this silence will make you hold on tighter in your heart, even if your hands have finally let go. They tell themselves that you are emotional, that you feel deeply, that you are sensitive, but instead of honoring that as a beautiful thing, they secretly bank on it. They trust that those same feelings that kept you awake at night, that made you send the long messages, that pushed you to give them one more chance, will keep doing the same job now. They expect that every wave of longing will make you reinforce the bond, replay the memories, Hold them in a soft light, because as long as your bond hurts you more than it disrupts them, they never have to face the real cost of their silence. In their fantasy version of this story, they can stay quiet for months, even longer, and still come back to a heart that is open and raw. They imagine you may be angry at first, you may demand a small explanation, you may tell them they hurt you. But they also imagine you melting the moment they say, "I'm sorry, I've been going through a lot, I never stopped caring." They imagine that your love for them will override the pain, that the depth of what you feel will turn into instant forgiveness. They expect the bond to have been like a slow burn on your side, keeping you warm and wounded at the same time, while for them it has been more like a security blanket folded neatly on a shelf, something they can grab when the loneliness hits. They are not picturing nights where you finally sleep deeply without them on your mind. They are not picturing days where you laugh and genuinely forget to check their social media. They are not picturing a version of you who lets the bond transform into wisdom instead of chains. They are picturing a version of you who stays emotionally frozen in the last moment you shared, holding the last good memory like a sacred relic, and their silence sits on top of that, not as a wake-up call for their own growth, but as a test of how much you can suffer and still stay emotionally loyal. Think about how many times the bond has hurt you and yet you stayed. Think about how many times you tried to walk away, but one memory, one song, one photo, one "I miss you" from them dragged you back in. They have seen that. They have lived that with you. So it makes sense that they quietly assume the pattern will repeat. They assume the emotional pain of letting them go will be more unbearable for you than the pain of hanging on. And as long as they believe that, they feel no urgency to change, no urgency to confront their avoidance, no urgency to ask themselves why they keep hurting someone who did nothing but love them. Because in their mind your love is like a cushion that will always be there when they fall, absorbing the impact of their choices. While you sit here in no contact, feeling every ounce of this distance, there are moments when the bond feels like a physical weight on your chest. You feel pulled back to the conversations. You remember how safe their voice once felt. You replay the good days on loop until the bad days blur around the edges. You wonder if cutting them off was too extreme. You question if you should have given them one more chance, and each time you do that, without holding them accountable in your mind, the bond hurts you, but it doesn't move them. They remain untouched by the intensity that is wrecking you. Because they are not in the room when your heart breaks. They do not hear the arguments you have with yourself at 2 a.m. They only see the results of those arguments if you break no contact, if you reach out, if you let them back in without requiring anything different. And every time that happens, it teaches them that your pain is survivable to them, that your heartbreak never actually forces them to look in the mirror. It only forces you to bend further. What they do not expect is what happens when you decide that the bond has to start hurting them too. Not through revenge, not through games, but through absence, through consequences, through the one thing they fear the most, losing access to a heart that loves them deeply. They do not expect you to let the pain of this bond finally push you forward instead of pulling you back. Because when you say, "I cannot carry this anymore. I cannot keep letting this hurt live in my body," while they float in and out as they please, you begin to shift the weight. You begin to let the bond educate you instead of imprison you. You start asking, what did this teach me about what I will never again accept? What did this reveal about how much I was willing to abandon myself? What did this show me about the difference between attachment and healthy love? And those questions slowly turn the pain you feel into boundaries, into clarity, into the quiet, steady decision that if they ever come back, it will not be to the same version of you. It will not be to the same dynamic, where your bond is used as leverage to avoid their growth. They expect your love for them to always be stronger than your love for yourself. They expect the bond to always pull you back into the old pattern. And that is why your healing is such a shock to that hidden expectation, because the moment you decide that the bond you have with you, with your own soul, your own peace, your own future, matters more than the bond you had with someone who repeatedly broke it, everything shifts. Their silence stops being a pause in a story you are desperate to resume, and starts being a chapter you are willing to close if they refuse to grow. And whether they ever feel the full weight of that or not, you are no longer the one carrying all of it alone. They expect you to be watching their every move from a distance, tracking their posts, their stories, their subtle signals. So they still feel chosen without having to openly choose you. And I need you to see how twisted and exhausting that has been for your heart, because even in this silence, even in no contact, they are still running a quiet show in their mind where you are the unseen audience. They post the song lyric that sounds a little too specific. They share a quote about healing or needing space. They change their profile picture. They show themselves out with friends, laughing, looking unbothered. And somewhere inside they imagine you seeing it, pausing, feeling something, wondering if it is about you. They want the hit of knowing they still live rent-free in your mind, without paying rent, with any real effort. They want the comfort of believing that every time they step into the digital room, your eyes follow them, your heart reacts, your thoughts spiral. Even though they are no longer standing next to you in real life in a way that gives you safety. You have lived through this. You have felt that pang in your stomach when their name pops up online. You have watched their stories, and then hated yourself for watching. You have seen them post like everything is fine, while you are barely holding yourself together, and then you turn that pain inward and say, I should be stronger. I should stop checking. I should stop caring. But please understand, this is not just about willpower. Your brain was trained over time to monitor them. You were conditioned by all the inconsistency to scan for clues, to read between the lines, to use their online behavior as a weather report for the state of the connection. And they got used to that power. They got used to you being the one hyper-tuned into every shift, every silence, every breadcrumb of attention. So now, even in no contact, they still expect that dynamic to be alive. They still expect that you are silently watching, silently reacting, silently waiting. When they post something vaguely emotional, a sad quote, a cryptic message, a throwback song, they know it will land on you differently than it lands on anyone else. They know your heart will pick it up and twist it, asking, is that about me? Is that a sign? Are they hurting too? Should I reach out? And they like that. They like knowing they can stir your feelings without risking anything. They like knowing they can tap into your energy without sending a single direct message. It lets them feel connected without being accountable. It feeds their ego and calms their fear of being forgotten. Because your imagined gaze is doing all the work for them. Even when they act like they do not care whether you see anything. There is a part of them that notices when you view their story, that registers your name in the viewer list, that feels a little buzz of validation. See, they are still here, they still watch, they still care. And that small moment is enough for them to avoid the deeper question. If I know this person still cares, why am I not moving toward them with honesty? Why am I content with them suffering silently while I perform being fine on a screen? Why do I want to be watched more than I want to be known? Meanwhile, you are caught in a vicious loop. Every time you check, your nervous system gets triggered. A song or a selfie or a night out becomes another wave of overthinking. Are they missing me? Are they replacing me? Are they trying to get a reaction? Are they really as happy as they look? And instead of healing, you are re-injuring yourself through pixels. You are trying to decode a person who has already shown you that they are more comfortable hinting than speaking plainly, more comfortable posting than apologizing, more comfortable being a mystery than being a partner. And yet, because you love them, you keep giving meaning to those subtle signals. You keep using them as tiny hopes, tiny hooks that keep you emotionally tied to someone who is not physically sitting across from you doing the work. They expect that. They rely on that. They count on your capacity to feel deeply and interpret endlessly, because as long as you are busy wondering what their posts mean, you are not fully asking what their actions mean. You are not fully sitting in the truth that someone who wanted to repair with you would reach out with clarity, not captions. There is a part of you that feels stupid for even noticing. And I want to tell you, you are not stupid. You are bonded. You are human. Your brain was wired through this relationship to look for crumbs of reassurance wherever it could find them, especially when words and actions became inconsistent. Of course, you are going to notice their movements online. Of course, you are going to feel your heart race when they appear on your screen. That does not make you weak. It makes you someone who has been in a long emotional tug of war and is just now putting down the rope. The shift happens when you stop playing the role they secretly wrote for you, the silent observer keeping their sense of importance alive, and start reclaiming your gaze for yourself when you unfollow or mute, not to be petty, but to reduce the constant triggers hitting your nervous system. When you decide, I will not use their posts as a measure of my value. I will not keep letting a story view turn into a story I write in my head about who I am. When you catch yourself checking and gently pull your attention back to your own life, your own healing, your own timeline, you are doing something radical. You are breaking the invisible contract where your job was to watch and feel while they hid and performed. They expect you to keep watching so they can feel chosen without choosing, but you are allowed to choose differently now. You are allowed to step out of the audience and walk back onto the stage of your own life. You are allowed to let their subtle signals float past without assigning them meaning. You are allowed to say, if you want access to my heart, you will not get it through a vague lyric or an Instagram story. You will get it through a direct, honest, consistent presence. And until that shows up, I am not going to keep sacrificing my peace to be the unseen pair of eyes, propping up your sense of importance from afar.